Once upon a time, there was a man named Jonah. God told him to go to the big city of Nineveh and tell the people to turn away from their evil ways and start worshiping God instead. But instead of listening to God, Jonah decided to run away. He ran to the harbor and jumped on a boat going the opposite direction. Soon he was on his way to the far-off land of Tarshish. Now, God didn't like it when Jonah disobeyed him, so he did something to teach Jonah a lesson. God made a big and scary storm come over the sea. The wind was so strong that the boat was about to break apart. The men on the boat were scared. They thought the sea was angry because they had done something wrong. So they started throwing all their stuff into the sea to make it stop. But it didn't help. Then Jonah remembered that he had done something wrong. He hadn't listened to God, and he knew that God was mad at him. So Jonah stood up and told the men on the boat, "I know why the sea is so angry. It's because I haven't listened to what God told me to do. I should be on my way to Nineveh, but I ran away. I think the only way to make the sea calm down is for me to go into the sea." The men on the boat didn't want to lose Jonah, but they also wanted the sea to calm down. So they asked him if he was sure that this was the only way. Jonah said yes, and the men started crying as they prepared to say goodbye. Then they threw Jonah into the sea. As soon as Jonah hit the water, the storm stopped. And even though he had been in the sea for a long time, he wasn't tired or wet. But then something amazing happened. A huge fish swallowed him whole. Now this wasn't just any fish. God had made this fish especially for Jonah. It was a great big fish that would later become known as a whale. And you might be wondering, how did Jonah get out of the belly of the whale? Well, let me tell you, when Jonah was inside the dark and wet belly of the fish, he started to remember what God had told him to do. He remembered that he had not listened to God and that he had run away instead of going to Nineveh. Jonah felt very bad about what he had done. He started crying and praying to God and thanked God that even when he didn't listen, God still loved him and hadn't given up on him. And Jonah promised God that he would never disobey him again. After 3 days and 3 nights, God told the fish to spit Jonah out onto dry land. So the fish spit Jonah out, and he was very happy to be alive. He had learned an important lesson about listening to God, and he knew that God had a plan for him. Now that Jonah was free from the belly of the fish, he went to the city of Nineveh just like God had told him to. He walked through the streets and told everyone he met to turn away from their evil ways and start following God instead. And amazingly, everyone in the city believed what Jonah told them. This included the king of Nineveh. All of them repented and turned to God. When God saw that the people of Nineveh had repented, he was very happy. He had planned to destroy the city because of how evil it was. But now he wouldn't do it. Jonah had done what God had asked him to do, and because of that, the people of Nineveh had turned away from their evil ways and now they would live. So this is the story of Jonah and the whale. Do you know anyone who has done something wrong but then asked God for forgiveness and changed their ways? Share your thoughts below. Long ago, in a far-off land, there was a man chosen by God to deliver an important message. His name was Jonah. But Jonah didn't want to do what God had told him. He wanted to go the opposite direction. So he ran away. He went to a nearby city. There, he found a ship ready to sail across the big sea. Jonah paid the sailors to let him ride with them. He hid on the ship, hoping to escape and start a new life far away. But God had a plan of his own. He sent a big storm to shake the ship. The waves crashed and the wind blew hard. The sailors were scared. They prayed to their gods for help. Meanwhile, Jonah was sleeping. But the rocking of the ship woke him up. He knew the storm was because of him. The sailors came to Jonah and asked him, "Why did you do this to us? Tell us what you did wrong so we can fix it." Jonah told them the truth. "I'm supposed to go to a far-off city called Nineveh, but I ran away. I'm sure the storm will stop if I leave the ship." The sailors didn't want to lose Jonah, but they also wanted the storm to end. So they asked him to pray to his God for help. Jonah closed his eyes and talked to God. He asked God to forgive him and to save him from the raging sea. After he finished his prayer, the sailors threw him into the sea. The waves around Jonah seemed to calm down, but then a huge fish swallowed him whole. Inside the fish, it was dark and wet. Jonah missed the sun and fresh air. But after a while, he remembered why he was there. It was because he had not listened to God. He prayed to God, asking for forgiveness and promising to listen to God in the future. 3 days passed. On the third night, Jonah prayed to God again. He thanked God for not giving up on him and for sending the fish to save him from the sea. Suddenly, the fish spit Jonah out on some dry land. Now Jonah's adventure was over, but his mission wasn't. God had told him to go to Nineveh, and Jonah knew he had to go there now. So he walked towards the city, carrying the message from God. When Jonah reached the city gates, he told the guards, "Tell the king of Nineveh that God wants him to turn away from his evil ways." The king listened to Jonah and believed him. He called all the people of Nineveh and told them to turn away from their evil ways. Everyone in the city changed their ways, and God was happy. You see, God didn't want to punish the people of Nineveh. He wanted them to turn away from their evil ways and follow him instead. Because of Jonah's bravery in delivering God's message, the people of Nineveh repented, and the city was saved. And that's the end of the story of Jonah and the whale. What did you think of the story? Did you learn any lessons from it? Tell us in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more exciting Bible stories. Until next time, God bless you. Thanks for watching BibleLens. What if the whole world spoke the same language, worked together, and built a tower that reached the heavens? Sounds unstoppable, right? But in the Bible, that plan led to something no one expected: confusion, scattering, and the birth of many languages. This is the story of the Tower of Babel. Now, if you're not familiar with the story of the Tower of Babel, well then let me just jump right into it. In the days following the flood, all people spoke one language and everyone understood the same words. Now these people settled in the land of Shinar, which is also known as Babylonia, and over time they began to grow and multiply, and eventually they decided we need a city, we need a big city, and we should build a tower so tall that its top will reach up to the heavens. And so that's exactly what they did. They started to build this tower, and it was built of burnt bricks, and they used bitumen, that's a kind of tar, to make it into a kind of cement. And they said, "Let's make a name for ourselves, and let's make sure that we're not scattered across the face of the earth like we were before the flood. You know, we don't want that to happen again. We want to stay together. We want to have a great big city, and we want our tower to reach up into the heavens." So the people are working together, and they're using their ingenuity and their strength, and they were doing great. And it says that they were doing it in a way that no plan of theirs would now be impossible for them to carry out. So they were basically saying, "Hey, if we can build this tower, what can't we do? We can conquer anything. We can do anything we want to do. If we can build this tower, nothing will be impossible for us." Then one day, God came down from heaven and was looking over the earth, and he looked at this city and the tower that the people were building. And when he looked at them and he saw how they were coming together and working together, and he noticed that with one language, nothing they planned would be impossible for them. That probably sounded good to God, like, "Oh, my people are speaking one language. They're getting along. They're working together. They're creating something beautiful and great here." But then God looked down at them, and his perspective shifted a little bit. And instead of thinking, "Oh, this is great, my people are united," instead he thought, "Oh, whoa, wait a minute. If they keep going in this direction, if they continue to work together and they have one language, then pretty soon nothing will be impossible for them. They'll be able to conquer anything. They'll be able to build anything. They'll be able to do anything." And that made God a little nervous, a little worried. You see, God created humans to live under him. He created humans to worship him. He created humans to acknowledge him and know that he's God and they're not. And he didn't want them to get so powerful and so strong that they didn't need him anymore, that they were too powerful for him, that they were too strong for him, that they didn't acknowledge him or respect him. Or even worse, God was afraid that they would try to reach up to heaven with their tower, and they would try to take God's place in heaven. Because in the ancient Near East, people believed that the gods lived up in the sky. And so they thought that if they could just build this tower up high enough, maybe they could even meet the gods. Maybe they could go up and live with the gods. Maybe they could become gods themselves. So God looks down and he thinks, wait a minute, I got to do something here. Because if they keep going in this direction, they might just become too powerful and too strong. So God came down. And when he came down, he did something very drastic. He confused their language so that they didn't understand one another anymore, so they all spoke different languages, and they didn't understand one another. The scripture says that at that point the building stopped, and then the people began to scatter themselves across the face of the earth. So they weren't able to stay in one place and build one city and build a tower anymore because they didn't understand each other. Everyone was speaking different languages. No one could understand who was saying what. So the building stopped, and then they all went their separate ways. Now, the place was called Babel because there God confused the language of the whole world. That's where we get the word Babel. And so this story explains why there's so many different languages in the world today. Now, this is an ancient Mesopotamian creation account. Ancient Mesopotamian people created this story to explain why there's different languages in the world today. There's many different versions of this story. This is just the version that we find in the book of Genesis. Now, there's a lot of stuff in Scripture that's hard for us to understand, but when we read this story, I think there's some stuff that we can take away from this and apply it to our lives today. First of all, this story teaches us that God is all-powerful. God is in control, and he still sits on the throne. So when we start to think, oh man, we've got some problems, we've got some issues, and we might even be tempted to think, oh man, the world's gone crazy. Nothing makes sense anymore. People aren't making any sense. Things aren't making any sense. When we read this story, we're reminded that God is in control. God is all-powerful. He's all-knowing. And he has everything under his control. Nothing happens without God. Nothing gets past God. And he is sovereign over every situation. Secondly, this passage teaches us that we should never forget God's sovereignty. That's exactly what those people did in the story. They forgot God. They forgot that God was God. They forgot that he created them. They forgot that they needed him. They forgot that they depended on him, and they tried to act like God themselves. They tried to take God's place. They tried to act like they were God. And that's not a good thing for us to do. We have to remember that God is God, and we are not. He's in charge. We're not in charge. He's the king of our life. We're not the kings of our life. And we have to make sure that we always remember that God is God, and we're not. Finally, this story reminds us that unity isn't always a good thing. Now, you might be thinking, Kyle, what do you mean? Unity is always a good thing. We should always strive to come together. We should always strive to be unified. We should never strive to be divided. Well, yes, that's true. But listen to the context here. They were unified. They were unified, they were getting along, they were speaking the same language, they were working together, and they were building something beautiful. But that unity was leading them astray. That unity was leading them to the point where they would try to act like God. So sometimes unity isn't always a good thing. Sometimes we can get so unified and so strong that we begin to act like God, and we begin to think that we're too powerful for God, and we're too strong for God, and we do not need God. So sometimes unity isn't always a good thing. And we have to make sure that we're always relying on God and depending on God and acknowledging God. Even if we're unified, even if we're getting along, even if we're working together, we have to make sure that we always acknowledge God. So those are just a few thoughts that I have on this passage. Do you have any thoughts on this passage? Do you have any thoughts on the Tower of Babel? Why do you think God did what he did? What do you think this passage teaches us? About God? About us? What do you think about this passage? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. We'll be sharing more Bible stories to inspire and encourage you, so stay connected with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Thank you for watching BibleLens. Have you ever been in a situation where it felt like everything was spinning out of control? You could be facing financial troubles, health issues, relationship problems, or maybe even something as simple as a bad day at work. Whatever it is, you feel overwhelmed and like you just don't have the strength to keep going. Well, if you can relate to that, then I have good news for you. There is someone who has been through far worse than anything we could ever imagine and come out on top. And not only that, but he conquered it all with style and grace. And if we can learn how he did it, we might just be able to apply those same principles to our own lives and come out of our situation stronger than ever. So let's take a look at how Jesus calmed the storm and what we can learn from it. Have you ever been out on a boat in the middle of a raging storm? If you have, you know it can be a terrifying experience. The waves crashing around you, the wind whipping through the rigging, and the constant threat of danger lurking just beneath the surface. Well, imagine being in a boat with Jesus and his disciples on the Sea of Galilee when suddenly a fierce windstorm comes out of nowhere. That's exactly what happened, and the story is told in all 4 Gospels. So let's get started. As the crowds pressed in on Jesus along the shore, he knew it was time to cross to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. So he told his disciples to get into the boat and go ahead of him. As they were rowing across the lake, Jesus dismissed the crowd and went up on a mountain to pray. Meanwhile, the disciples were battling strong headwinds as they tried to make their way to the other side. But after a while, Jesus joined them in the boat, and all was well until suddenly a fierce windstorm swept across the lake. Waves began to swamp the boat, and the disciples were terrified that it was going to sink. Let's take a closer look at the disciples. These were a group of fishermen who had been with Jesus for several years. They had seen many miracles and heard countless teachings from him. Yet despite all this, they were still afraid. Why? Because they had never seen a storm like this before. It was one thing to be out on the Sea of Galilee in normal conditions, but it was quite another to be caught in the middle of a full-blown windstorm. As the waves crashed over the boat, they knew that if it capsized, they would drown. Fear can be a powerful emotion, and it can quickly take over your thoughts and actions. When the disciples realized the danger they were in, they panicked. They began to cry out to Jesus, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to die?" They probably thought that Jesus was asleep and didn't know what was happening, or maybe they felt abandoned and alone in their struggle against the storm. Whatever the reason, their fear was palpable. Now let's look at Jesus. Throughout the story, Jesus is portrayed as being in control of the situation. Even when the disciples were panicking and crying out to him, he remained calm and collected. This is a valuable lesson for us to remember in our own lives. No matter what challenges we face, we must remain calm and in control of our emotions. Panic and fear will only make things worse. Instead, we should trust in God's plan and believe that he will help us through our difficulties. But what was the turning point in the story? When the disciples woke Jesus, it was a crucial moment. They had been calling out to him in fear and desperation, but their cries had gone unanswered. However, when they called him teacher, something changed. They reminded him of who they were and their relationship with him. And that made all the difference. Jesus awoke, rebuked the wind and the waves, and spoke the words, "Peace, be still." And just like that, the storm was over. This story teaches us that even in the midst of the worst storms, God is still in control. We may feel like we're drowning in our problems, but if we call out to Jesus and remind him of who we are and our relationship with him, he will help us. In fact, Jesus calmed the storm because he knew that his disciples were in danger. But he also knew that it was an opportunity to teach them a valuable lesson about faith. After the storm had passed, he asked them, "Why are you so afraid?" How is it that you have no faith? He wasn't scolding them, but gently pointing out their lack of trust in him. You see, Jesus knew that they were more afraid of the storm than they were of him. They were focused on the waves and the wind, not on the one who had the power to calm them. We can learn a lot from this story. For example, we should never doubt Jesus' power. No matter how big or small our problems seem, he has the ability to solve them. We just need to put our faith in him. We must also remember to stay calm in difficult situations. Panicking will only make things worse. And finally, we should never forget that Jesus loves us and wants to help us. He is always there for us, even when we can't see him. What's the biggest lesson you learned from this passage? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to share this video with your friends so they can learn about Jesus' amazing power too. The disciples were amazed by what they had just experienced. They couldn't believe that the storm had been so fierce and that Jesus had calmed it so easily. They had seen him perform miracles before, but this was something else entirely. The wind and waves obey him. The words spoken by the disciples echoed the sentiments of everyone who witnessed the miracle. Who is this? Even the wind and waves obey him. They had seen firsthand the power of Jesus Christ, and they were in awe. The disciples had been with Jesus for 3 years, witnessing his miracles and teachings firsthand. They had seen him heal the sick, cast out demons, and feed the hungry. Yet nothing had prepared them for this. The awe they felt was not just because of the miracle itself, but because of what it revealed about Jesus. It showed them that he had complete control over the natural world, and that no one else could do what he did. You can imagine the whispers spreading like wildfire among the crowds who had gathered to hear about this amazing event. People were astounded by the news that Jesus had calmed the storm. The fame of his deeds spread far and wide, drawing people from all walks of life to hear more about him. This incident became a defining moment in the public's perception of Jesus, cementing his reputation as a miracle worker and a teacher with divine authority. This passage is a powerful reminder of the limitless power of Jesus Christ. It shows us that no challenge is too great for him to handle and that we can trust him completely. It also reveals the depth of Jesus' love for us. He doesn't just want us to believe in him, he wants us to experience his power firsthand. And when we do, we will be forever changed. But what about you? What lessons have you learned from this story? How has it impacted your faith and your relationship with Jesus? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And that's the story of how Jesus calmed the storm, showing his power over nature and his care for his disciples. When fear rises, remember, if Jesus is in your boat, you're never alone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Thank you for watching BibleLens.